Ikenos Tsuyoshi clamps onto his sword firmly and charges his foe. His enemy, Momoya Samadare, stands still, cold and unshaken, calculating Tsuyoshi's every move with calm, calculated precision. Swords clash, blood is drawn, but their resolve doesn't waver, not even for a second. But how the hell did he get into this situation to begin with? Let's start from the beginning. A long, long time ago, Oni or demons used to exist. These creatures of the underworld were interested in only one thing: killing humans and destroying everything around. No one seemed safe from their deadly rampage until one day a man stepped up against them. His name was Momotaro, and he single-handedly raided the Oni island Onigashima, where he defeated numerous Oni. That was the beginning of the endless war between Momotaro and the Oni. On a dark and gloomy day, with thunder cracking and the roads soaked in red, a man with an eye patch tries to stop his senior from what he was about to do. He yells at him, desperately trying to get him to find reason and realize he was making a mistake by letting the baby in his arms live, and that he'd regret it later on. But the man had made up his mind. He had faith that sparing the tiny innocent life wrapped around his chest wasn't a mistake. In present day, the world seems to have moved on from its blood-soaked past. People now lead normal lives. That, however, isn't the case for Shiki Ikenos, a high schooler, who learns from his friend that he just got expelled for fighting. Shiki seemed very unbothered by the news, as if it were a normal thing for him, and tells his friend it wasn't a big deal. After he gets off his phone, Shiki's father, Tsuyoshi Ikenos, comes storming into his room. He pounds Shiki's head in with his fist as he tells him he just found out about him getting expelled again. He demands an explanation for why he got expelled, while also wanting to know why Shiki had picked a GTA gun store layout as an interior design. Shiki turns the question on him and tells him he heard business wasn't booming all that much lately. Shiki's father turns the tables on him by telling him an expelled student like him was the last person who should be criticizing him. One thing leads to another, and Shiki ends up telling Tsuyoshi he won't end up like him and was glad that they weren't actually related by blood. Tsuyoshi tells Shiki he shouldn't be saying stuff like that when the phone starts ringing.
Oi, Shiki!
So he heads downstairs to answer. The phone call was from an actual customer for a change, and they wanted a home delivery. Before heading to the car, Tsuyoshi looks at Shiki's childhood picture and leaves. Shiki sees him leaving in his car and whispers he wished he had been taken in by a rich man instead. He grabs one of his many guns and takes aim at the target. He is about to pull the trigger when suddenly he hears an explosion. Next second, a black mist starts pouring into his room. It then starts to wrap around his leg, and before Shiki can do anything, it pulls him out and throws him on the street below. The whole neighborhood had become vacant, and it was foggy all around. Then, from within the mist, a man in a suit walks out and asks him if he was Ikenos Shiki. Shiki doesn't even get a chance to say anything as a high-speeding car crashes into the man out of the blue. It was his adoptive father, who quickly tells Shiki to hop inside because he didn't have time. Shiki, all nervous and confused, gets into the car, and they immediately speed off. The dark mist could be seen hovering over the man in the suit's body. Tsuyoshi was wondering if they should just leave the country at this point, now that they had been found. Shiki frantically asks his father about what was happening and why he killed that man. He feared that his father had gotten into a really messy situation with some loan shark, but that was far from the case. Tsuyoshi tells him the man he saw back there wasn't going to be killed by something like that. Then comes the real shocker. Shiki was an Oni, while the man in the suit, Momoya Samadare, was a descendant of the Momotaro bloodline. Shiki doesn't believe him at first, but then the same black mist from before almost impales Tsuyoshi. Within seconds, it has their whole car completely covered. Losing all visibility, Tsuyoshi stops the car in a dramatic fashion at a warehouse and sends Shiki flying out the car. He steps outside his car and runs to his son, but then the car explodes. The explosion made him take his eyes off Shiki for a few seconds, and in that moment Shiki had vanished completely. Tsuyoshi starts looking around and sees the black mist entering the warehouse. Inside the warehouse, Shiki had been tied up in a web of the black mist like a bug caught in a spider trap, with no way of escaping. Samadare tells him he, an Oni, was like a pest who should be exterminated, and it was the job of those at the Momotaro agency to exterminate threats like him. All Shiki could ask in return was how you are still alive. That's when Tsuyoshi comes walking into the warehouse. He tells the tale of the 1,000-year war between the Oni and the Momotaro made possible by passing down the fight to their successive generations. While the Momotaro formed the agency that's now known as the Momotaro Agency, the Oni had started to take human form out of fear and began to hide among the humans. Tsuyoshi then reaches his hand to the back of his robe, while Samadare pulls out 2 black mist weapons resembling katanas. Samadare then charges Tsuyoshi. In a shocking twist, Tsuyoshi, who seemed unarmed till the last second, pulls out a massive blade out of nowhere, made from the same exact thing, and their blades clash. This black mist was a trait only possessed by those of the Momotaro bloodline, meaning Tsuyoshi was one of them too. Samadare greets Tsuyoshi as his senior and makes a comment about how much both of them had aged. He then calls Tsuyoshi by the name he went by at the agency, Tsuyoshi Momogawara. Tsuyoshi tells him not to call him that. He was Tsuyoshi Ikonos now. But Samadare's retort was simply changing his name didn't change the fact that he was actually a Momotaro. Although, since he had helped an Oni, their sworn enemy, Samadare would have to eliminate him as well. Tsuyoshi scoffs and charges Samadare. Their blades clash in a thunderous roar. As they're fighting, Samadare tries to ask Tsuyoshi why he was sheltering Oni, when they were just monsters who didn't think twice about taking human lives. Shiki was still trying to process all this. Why did Tsuyoshi hide the truth from him all this time? Tsuyoshi rushes Samadare one more time, leaps and brings his weapon down on him. Samadare quickly dodges and in a flash, settles the fight. 2 slits on each shoulder start gushing out blood as Tsuyoshi collapses, while Shiki can do nothing but watch it all happen before him. Samadare walks up to Tsuyoshi and asks him how he thought he could defeat him after all the battles he had survived ever since he left. As Samadare is about to head over to Shiki to finish his job, Tsuyoshi grabs hold of his foot. Samadare asks him what drove him this far. Why do all this for a cursed Oni? What father would need a reason to protect their child? How could he kill an innocent child just because of their blood? Tsuyoshi asks Samadare if he would be able to do the same. Samadare tells him to shut up and takes his sword out to finish him off. Meanwhile, Shiki had done nothing but watch as his father shed blood for him. Now he was about to die while he did nothing. Why was his father dying? Wasn't he the target? His eyes start turning bloodshot red as these questions race his mind. How dare this man try to kill his father? An ominous aura starts coming off Shiki. Anger starts taking over as his eyes, nose and mouth now start oozing out blood. Only one thought prevailed in his mind. He must kill this man. Horns start to appear. His pupils had completely disappeared by this point, and when Samadare notices something was off, Shiki was no longer in the web. Out of nowhere, guns appear next to Samadare's face and go off at point blank. He barely manages to dodge but couldn't see the culprit. He then glances at the roof, where he finds Shiki hanging upside down. Shiki had now taken the form of a demon completely. This phenomenon, as Samadare calls it, was known as Awakening. As he prepares to battle, Samadare lists the 2 reasons why demons were so terrifying. First was their ability to manipulate blood in any manner or shape. But that wasn't what truly made them so formidable and deadly. As they begin their fight and Samadare manages to slice an arm off Shiki, he mentions the second reason. The reason why Momotaro killed demons was because of their uncontrollable savagery and their loss of humanity. Shiki regains his arm in a second. He manipulates his blood to form every artillery weapon under the sun, with each one pointed at Samadare. He then unloads the full clip on him, letting loose a missile in between that Samadare barely misses. Samadare counters with a sword slash, but all this high intensity was starting to reveal his real age. He was gasping for air when Shiki shoots out of the smoke and kicks him across the warehouse. Shiki then places his foot on Samadare's face and points his guns at him. A bright light followed by an explosion takes half the warehouse with it. Despite being hit at such close range, Samadare had somehow managed to survive, although not unscathed, as one side of his body was now permanently burned. Shiki, on the other hand, starts screaming all of a sudden. He starts to lose balance and his demon form collapses. His senses finally return to him, and he had no clue what was going on. As he starts freaking out over his demon hands, Samadare points out he was experiencing a state of confusion from memory loss and bodily mutation. Samadare takes out his sword and starts walking in Shiki's direction. All demons must be eliminated. That was all that he was thinking about. His pace increases and he dashes to deliver the final blow on a disoriented Shiki. The sword pierces right through, but it wasn't Shiki who got impaled. It was his father, Tsuyoshi. Despite his fatal injuries, he somehow managed to save his son one last time. Samadare didn't understand how he could still sacrifice himself for Shiki after having seen the state he was just in. A flashback from the past of a young Shiki crosses his mind. He didn't regret his decision. The short time he spent with Shiki wasn't too bad, and it made him happy. Passers-by start noticing the wreckage of the warehouse, and the place would be swarming with police and firefighters in no time. Samadare clicks his tongue and disappears into nothingness. Shiki tries to stop him, but he was already gone. The adrenaline wears off and Tsuyoshi finally collapses because of his injuries. Shiki starts panicking and thinks about calling an ambulance, but Tsuyoshi stops him. His time was nearing its end, and all he wanted to do was spend it talking to his son one last time. With the last bit of energy he had left in his body, Tsuyoshi apologizes to Shiki for not telling him about all this sooner. He didn't know how to go about telling an innocent child people despised him and wanted to kill him just because of the blood running through his veins. He tells Shiki to get stronger, strong enough so that he could defeat the Oni and Momotaro agency and live his life freely. He lifts his bloodied hand and bumps Shiki's chest, asking him to promise him this, man to man, that he will do that. Shiki gets into a rage and lifts Tsuyoshi up. He tells him to shut up and stop telling him such a dramatic final speech as if he was about to really kick the bucket. He didn't care how beat up or wounded he was. He couldn't just leave him like this. There was still stuff they hadn't talked about, like why there would be fewer liquor bottles but no cash to show for it. Tsuyoshi smiles and tells him that it would be nice if Oni and Momotaro could live like this, side by side. His grip around Shiki's body loosens and he falls to the ground. Those would be the last words that he would say to Shiki. Shiki grabs him and goes into denial. He couldn't have died. They still needed to talk about so much. Shiki still hadn't apologized for saying he was glad they weren't blood-related. What he wouldn't give to be called an idiot one last time, but that would never happen again. Tsuyoshi had passed on with a smile. Shiki's tears fall on his face. Tsuyoshi would have definitely made fun of him if he saw him like that. Shiki lays his beloved father down gently on the ground and quietly sits by his side. A man on roller skates shows up, and before Shiki could flinch, he knocks him out cold. Elsewhere, a group of people who look like possessed mummies discuss Samadare's failed attempt at killing Shiki. The existence of the Momotaro agency was a secret from the public. People also must not know that demons still walked among them. The Council of Mummies, most likely the upper echelon of the Momotaro agency, decides to kill Shiki before he awakens. Their goal was to kill each and every Oni. By a stormy sea, a man stood alone on a cliff. He was currently on the phone with the guy on roller skates who was called Nato. Nato referred to him as principal. Their conversation was about Nato getting an applicant through the entrance test. An applicant that's successful was something they had not seen in many years. In fact, a lot of this year's applicants were a bumper crop. Although Nato was skeptical about how useful they would be. Apart from them, Nato informs him about retrieving one more applicant, but tells the principal evaluating him might be a waste of time if he's useless, as we see Shiki bound up to a chair in a hall room somewhere. In a scene from Shiki's childhood, on a bright and beautiful day, Shiki is seen playing around in the sand pit. Tsuyoshi shows up and tells him it was time to go home. His hands covered with sand, Shiki reaches out to his father to carry him piggyback when suddenly Tsuyoshi gets slashes from behind. Shiki can only watch in horror as his father collapses from the cuts put on his body by a bloodied Samadare, staring at Shiki with extreme contempt. Shiki wakes up. It was a nightmare. On his left was Nato, busy performing one handstand push-ups while balancing on his umbrella. His count was currently at 1296 when he tells Shiki he was waiting for him to wake up on his own. Forcing him up would have put Shiki in a half-conscious state where he would be unable to understand the explanation Nato gives him. As he concludes his reps at 1300, he lets Shiki know the thing he hated most was repeating himself and inefficiency. Nato introduces himself to Shiki as Mudano Nato. He tells Shiki that his father's body was safely stored in a place elsewhere, and he will not be disclosing what this place, where they were currently at, was. Nato then skates to the whiteboard in the corner of the room and drags it in front of Shiki. His explanation for wearing roller skates was, of course, because they were efficient. Nato then writes the name Momotaro Agency on the board and asks Shiki if he had seen someone controlling black mist. A person who could do that was a Momotaro, a descendant of the original Momotaro, and the agency they all worked together in to exterminate Oni was called Momotaro Agency, to act as a counter or opposition to it. The Oni built an agency as well and named it Oni Agency. Nato's job was to simply find awakened Oni like Shiki, assess them, and decide if they were fit to join the Oni Agency or not. That was all the explaining from his side. He then unties Shiki's mouth to take questions when Shiki goes absolutely ballistic on him. He threatens to do all sorts of unimaginable things to Nato if he finds out he laid so much as a finger on his father. Nato responds by telling him he wasted 35 seconds of his time and deducts a point as punishment. He had already told Shiki that his father was safely stored somewhere. Nato starts questioning if perhaps Shiki lacked the brain capacity to understand that. Shiki's patience was beginning to run dry with him. He starts demanding to be let loose from this chair. Nato deducts another point. He tied Shiki to that chair because he had been behaving violently. Shiki had no idea who Nato was. He just grabbed him and brought him there. He tries to calm his nerves and think with a cool mind. Trying to look as non-threatening as he can, Shiki tells Nato he didn't have time for this. He wanted to find the man who killed his father and take revenge, although his attempt to look non-threatening was something he definitely needed to work on. Shiki realizes a person hungry for revenge won't be reasoned with through normal means. As he starts getting comfortable, he tells Shiki he always did find the standard method of evaluation inefficient. Nato takes off his tie and drops it in front of Shiki. He then quickly appears at the back of the chair, grabs the tie from both ends and pulls it, strangling Shiki in the process. As he's suffocating Shiki and stopping all blood flow to the brain, Nato mentions that a person's real self only showed itself in life and death situations and asks him to use his brain to get himself out of this. Apart from the pain, anger and frustration take over Shiki's body as he vows to not let himself get killed here like this. His eyes and nose start bleeding as he hits an Undertaker pose. Then all movement ceases. Nato thinks it's over, calling Shiki just an average fool. That's when the blood dripping from Shiki's body starts pooling on the ground and suddenly, weaponized tentacles shoot out of it aiming for Nato. Nato quickly gets out of there, but finds himself already being aimed at by Shiki, who then empties the entire clip on him. As the smoke clears, Nato emerges completely unharmed after using a blood umbrella as his shield against Shiki's onslaught. He describes Shiki's current state as Berserker mode and deducts an additional 100 points from his evaluation for not being able to use his own Oni blood. Nato tells Shiki he'll now show him how to correctly use Oni blood, although Shiki probably wouldn't be able to remember any of it because he was in Berserker mode. Shiki leaps right at Nato, an attack that would prove to be fatal if it caught its victim off guard. But there was one problem. Nato never lets his guard down. Next moment Shiki is back to being conscious again, and once again, he gets frightened seeing the aftermath, which this time around was quite catastrophic. Nato explains that Oni blood was powerful, but at the same time hard to control. It was like putting a rifle in the hands of a rabid chimpanzee. Shiki demands to know what Nato was holding. He tells him it was just a controlled manipulation of his Oni blood. Nato had reached the verdict on Shiki's evaluation, and it didn't look too good for Shiki. He gets disqualified. Shiki, on the other hand, was trying to make sense of what was happening. None of it made any sense to him, but there was one thing that was clear. Nato was strong. Shiki bows his head and begs Nato to teach him how to get stronger so he could avenge his father. Nato flat out rejects him, unfazed by the immaculate prostration displayed by Shiki. Nato decides Shiki was too dangerous to be left alive, so he cuts himself using his ring, throws the blood to the side, from which a blood umbrella takes form and gets ready to dispose of Shiki. Shiki sees this and tries to emulate him. He starts running with his hand scraping against the floor and turns to Nato's direction. Nato thinks he doesn't know what he's doing at first, but his cautious side tells him to not risk it. He points his umbrella in Shiki's direction and spikes burst out of it serving as his shield. As Shiki approaches, Nato comes up with all the possibilities that could unfold from that point on. Would he charge in directly, slide and try to sweep his legs, jump and attack from above, or feint and retreat? Shiki jumps and Nato gives off a contented smile, thinking he had successfully predicted this, when Shiki bounces off one of the spikes into the right and reveals a gun locked in right at Nato's face. He shoots and gets sent back from the recoil. As Shiki is wondering if he got him, he hears Nato say it was a fluke. As the smoke clears, Nato could be seen swirling the bullet around his finger before dismantling it. A disappointment after all. Shiki had only managed that gun because he had entered a half-berserk state. Finally finished with him, Nato decides to wrap things up quickly as he uses Blood Eclipse Release, Rebirth's Deluge. But then he witnesses something interesting. Shiki was actively suppressing his berserker mode and eventually frees himself from it completely. This was actually more impressive than just simply controlling your blood, so Nato stops his attack and asks Shiki how he managed it. Shiki tells him he would only answer that if he makes him his pupil. The reality was Shiki didn't actually know anything about Oni blood. But when he saw Nato control it, a thought crossed his mind. If Nato, a demon, could do that, then surely I, also a demon, could do that too. So boom. Shiki was able to make a gun after focusing his brain on trying to make a weapon out of his arm. Shiki expected to be praised and validated, but all Nato could tell him was how stupid his logic sounded. Nato couldn't believe that someone could control Oni blood with that level of stupidity. A hothead like Shiki who thought with his fists rather his head was the worst possible matchup for Oni blood. But then again, he did manage to control it somehow. This defies all logic according to what Nato knew and understood. Normally, when a demon starts to fall into berserker mode, rationality balances it out to prevent that from happening. This is explained with a very informative visual illustration of a demon's brain by using Nato as an example. When his emotions starts going haywire, his rationality warns his rational self about entering berserk mode. Rational self and rationality then decide to go with 30% usage for blood control, while the berserk side remains chained up in a highly secure prison cell. That's the norm, how things should be. But that all goes right out the window when it comes to Shiki. In his brain, if you want to call it that, when the alarms go off, his raw instinct knocks rationality out cold, releasing berserker. But berserker isn't safe either, as he forcefully submits it in order to control his blood. Rationality simply had no place in his brain. His crude and explosive instinct reigned supreme. Nato was interested in seeing what this kid does next. Meanwhile, Shiki continues to beg him to make him an underling, promising to soak all the information and knowledge he imparts on him like a sponge. And as soon as he's done killing Samadare, he'll perhaps even consider joining Nato's dumb Oni agency. Nato refuses. He wasn't going to make someone who would deliberately risk losing all control like that an underling. He was simply of no use to him, as he'd his efficiency. Nato forms a blade and sticks it into Shiki's skull. Or so it seems, as he only slams it on the right. Nato was going to make him an underling, but he wasn't opposed to the idea of making Shiki his student. Nato tells him he had actually been put through a test right now, and Shiki had, by the finest margins, passed it. As Shiki lies there wondering what was going on, Nato starts explaining everything, more efficiently this time. The island they were currently on was known as Hell's Doorstep, more commonly referred to as Onigashima. At the center is a school built for Onis called Rosetsu Academy. This school was anything but ordinary. Being a military school, its purpose was to train and prepare young Onis to fight against Momotaro Agency. Shiki was blown away that he was on an island, but his exitme was getting in the way of Nato's explanation, so he stabs Shiki's face. Nato continues that here they'll teach you how to control you Oni blood, how to fight, the history between Onis and Momotaro, and provide general education too every once in a while. Nato himself was Shiki's homeroom teacher. All this information had left Shiki's brain sizzling like a fried egg. Nato doesn't blame him. He knew his brain was the size of peanut. Shiki then asks if he could actually get stronger, so he could kill the man who took his father from him. Nato tells him in theory he could, if he somehow is able to make it here without getting expelled. This gives Shiki a new purpose and drive, and he agrees to joining Rosetsu Academy. As Shiki changes into his new uniform, he notices he horns on his head. Nato tells him those could be hidden away or shown at will once you learn to control you blood better, as he resumes his umbrella handstand push-ups. After he's done fitting into his new uniform, Nato tells Shiki he was the lowest ranked in terms of skill among his class. Shiki then asks Nato what he did with his father. His body was currently in the morgue. Nato had left funeral arrangements. Up to Shiki. Nato tells him to get on with that soon since dwelling on it wasn't the best idea. But when it seems like he was as cold as ice, Nato also shows his soft side as he advises Shiki to train and get stronger so he never has to go through that pain and regret again. But then he suddenly starts roller skating to class while telling Shiki he had 15 seconds to get there, otherwise he would be expelled. Somehow, someway Shiki actually makes it while Nato casually does warm-ups like it was nothing. Shiki gets excited about his first impression and starts thinking of ways to enter when Nato decides to lend him a hand, or kick in this case, and sends him tumbling through the door. The fall gives him a noseblood. Shiki spots a fellow classmate, Jin Kugasaki, and asks for a tissue. Jin didn't even want to give Shiki a second of his time, let alone a tissue. Shiki notices Jin had no horns and starts making fun of him, thinking he was some unawakened baby Oni. Jin then takes out his horns and tells Shiki displaying your horns around like that all the time was something only a dumb rookie would do. Sitting in the back while proudly displaying his horns, Ikari Yaroshi catches this and challenges Jin to a brawl. Sazanami Kuina was all for this first day rough housing while Juji Yusurube politely asks them all, in the most sophisticated manner they had ever seen, to not disrupt the class environment. Byobugora Homer starts apologizing for not having a tissue while Kiriyama Rokuro wonders if this stomach pain was going to be his end. With no tissue in sight, Juji takes out a page from his book. As painful as it was, he was willing to make this sacrifice if it could preserve peace. But after all that, Shiki tells him stuffing that would only hurt his nose more. Shiki and Jin then start getting into it when suddenly Nato appears behind them out of the blue. He had even seated Shiki in his chair before he knew it. The whole class, including Jin, were stunned. Nato then addresses the class and tells them that while they were supposed to go through operation and rules today, plans had changed. Instead, they will all be playing a game of tag with him. Nato takes them a forest called Shinra Forest and explains the rules. The game was simple. Just make it back to school within an hour. If everyone is caught, the game is over. But here's the catch, not making it to the goal in time will result in expulsion. Stakes had to be raised. Everyone here would one day potentially be facing the Momotaro agency. Nato tells then he won't use his blood unless they go berserker. Jin asks what if they kill him. Nato welcomes them to try, and if they do succeed, they'll graduate instantly and be allowed to pick a unit of their choice. Shiki thinks about how this could help him get to his target faster. Everyone here had a goal, and they will have to fight to achieve it. Everyone seemed excited, except Shiki, who still had doubts. Nato questions him about it and Shiki answers that wasn't the case. He will give it his all too. There was still one more rule, which Nato had forgotten to mention. Aside from making it back to the school within an hour, and without getting caught by their homeroom teacher Nato Mudano, the players would need to have these balls, which Nato held in his hand, with them to pass. Failing to do so would result in expulsion even if they passed the rest of the criteria. Nato then threw the 2 balls as far as he could, deep into Shinra Forest. While Shiki admired his teacher's throwing arm, Juji had made a more relevant observation. There were only 2 balls and 7 students. To help with this dilemma, Nato divided his class of 7 into 3 groups. Group 1 would have Homer, Shiki, and Jin. Group 2 included Juji and Ikari, while Group 3 consisted of Kuina and Rokuro. And to make things a little more spicy, Nato decided to pit Group 2 and 3 against each other for 1 ball. All students displayed a wide range of reactions to this new rule. Group 1 was up first. Nato opened up the door and told them he would enter 15 minutes after them. Shiki protested against being on the same team as Jin, but became remarkably understanding when he was told he would get expelled otherwise. Homer introduced herself to her group, beginning with Shiki. Having been a delinquent his entire life, girls were a species not often seen inhabiting the same space as Shiki, so it was a big surprise for him to see a real girl try to get to know him. Shiki's heart immediately melted for her, and he vowed to protect her no matter what since she reminded him of a helpless kitten. Homer then went to Jin, and his reaction was the complete opposite of Shiki's. Jin ignored her to the point that she started thinking she had offended him somehow and began profusely apologizing for doing that. Shiki came to her support and went off on Jin for making her cry. Jin couldn't care less about that and called Shiki an attention seeker. He then told Shiki to quit while he still could instead of getting escorted out on a stretcher later when the result would be the same anyway. Shiki wasn't going to let that discourage him. He told Jin he had his own personal reasons that made it imperative for him to win here. Jin overstepped a line by calling Shiki's reasons stupid, but Shiki was only able to give him a death stare when Nato told them to get on with the game already. Jin entered first, followed by Shiki, and then finally, after what seemed like 2 business days, Homer decided she was a part of this race too. Jin dashed through the forest with only one thought circling his mind: killing Nato, as doing that would get him his own unit and bring him one step closer to his objective. Out of nowhere, Shiki popped out swinging a stick at Jin. Jin changed his title for Shiki from attention seeker to clingy psycho. Shiki didn't usually bother with smaller squabbles, but this time it was different. Jin calling Shiki's motive meaningless had rubbed him the wrong way, so he demanded he take it back. As they would end up fighting for the ball anyway, Jin didn't see why they didn't just start now as he took off his mask, revealing his scarred mouth. Shiki told him showing off old wounds like that was something only weaklings did. Jin hit back with, if he beat him now, what would that make him? Jin ripped open the stitches on his arm using his finger and used blood control to form buzz saw blades on it. This was Jin's blood eclipse release. Shiki was shocked Jin could already do something like that. Jin told him he could run away with his tail tucked between his legs if he wanted. Shiki stood his ground. He knew running away here would be an injustice to his father's heroic sacrifice. Jin asked Shiki if he came here to avenge his father. After Shiki confirmed this, Jin went quiet for a moment, but then told Shiki that it really was impossible for them to understand each other now. Shiki bit his finger and tried to do a blood eclipse release himself, but nothing happened. Jin scoffed at Shiki's struggles. Shiki didn't understand why he couldn't do it. He believed if he focused or shouted loud enough it should work, but it didn't. What made this worse was that the last person to have this happen in front of was Jin. Jin told Shiki not to waste his time as he had bigger fish to fry. Shiki didn't back down and decided he would just bash Jin's head in instead. The two of them charged each other. When they had passed one another, Shiki had a stunned expression burned on his face as trees started to fall around the direction Jin dashed through. Meanwhile, Homer made her way through the forest, frightened if the sound just now was dangerous in any way. As she whimpered along, she got her foot stuck in a protruding root and fell face first on the forest floor. In her peril, she remembered Shiki's promise about supporting her and thought she could just lean on him, but she quickly stopped thinking that since she had made up her mind to stop depending on others so much. As a start, she decided to head in the direction of the ominous sound. Ikari and the rest had heard the sound of Jin's saws as well. Ikari thought about going in there to check it out, but Juji immediately forbade it as it was against the rules. Around the same time, Shiki and Jin's very one-sided battle continued. Shiki couldn't land one blow on Jin while Jin seemed to only hit Shiki square in the jaw. Moreover, Jin's blades were a headache too. They were completely different from what Nato used, and Shiki didn't understand that very well either yet. Jin took advantage of Shiki's lack of focus and delivered another punch, this time even harder. This was a new feeling for Shiki, being dominated so effortlessly like this. Being unable to understand this frustrated him beyond belief. Jin didn't even need to use his blood control for Shiki and began to leave when Shiki got up again. Jin decided to shut him up good by sending a razor-sharp attack at him, but the one who happened to get in its way out of nowhere was Homer. The attack had left quite a mark on the jungle, but luckily Homer was okay thanks to Shiki, who had moved her out of the way at the last second. Shiki, however, wasn't fine and blood from his wound he just sustained trying to protect Homer ended up falling on her. Shiki didn't even acknowledge the injury and instead started yelling at Jin for recklessly endangering Homer's life like that. Jin of course didn't admit to anything and instead told Shiki to pack his bags if an injury like that was enough to scare him. While these two were quarreling, Homer dropped to the ground and began to apologize profusely. But something was different this time. Blood started pouring out of her, and her powers started to activate. Her blood then morphed into an enormous blood beast. Jin knew demons had relatively more blood than humans, but for one to have this much of it inside them was ridiculous. The blood beast let out an eardrum-shattering scream, upon which Homer told Shiki and Jin to run away this second or the blood beast would kill them. Elsewhere in the forest, Nato was chilling with a butterfly when the principal showed up asking about the school orientation. Nato told him he decided to cancel those inefficient rules and regulations lectures and instead wanted to test the students in a practical sense. The principal called Nato kind for looking out for them like this. After all, his intentions were to make them tougher for their battle against the Momotaro one day. Most Oni children weren't this lucky, and many of them died every single year. Some of them got killed just because they were related to the principal himself, while some got taken in alive and got tested on as live test subjects. They neither knew nor understood anything, yet they had to pay the ultimate price. What could those children possibly be thinking in their final moments? The principal asked. He hoped that at least they would get into an equal and fair heaven. Nato didn't believe in heaven. He believed in power, have strength, and you won't die. It was as simple as that. The principal told Nato to train these kids so that they didn't end up in that situation and disappeared. Back to Group 1. Jin tried to attack the blood beast, but its size was just too much. Jin asked Homar to try and stop it. She couldn't. It wouldn't listen to her. Having lost so much blood, she started to lose consciousness, so Shiki decided to get her out of there. But something strange happened. The blood beast started to wrap its arms around her as though it was protecting her. Jin was surprised Homer's blood had a will of its own too. It then attacked Jin and Shiki with its blood, covering the entire area in it. Homer begged it to stop, this time referring to it as elder sister. Shiki heard that and got up. Homer urged him to run away while he still could, but Shiki didn't see what doing that would accomplish. Homer was bleeding out, and if she wasn't administered medical care soon, she would die. Shiki had already seen someone die before his eyes, and he was not going to relive that horror. He told her despite what she was saying, he could still see the hope in her eyes, desperately trying to cling to life. Homer passed out again, and the blood beast let out another scream after cupping her in its hand. The intense sound waves reached all the way to the end of the forest, where the rest of the students were waiting, startling them as well. Nato was quietly watching from the sidelines. This beast that Homer had created was actually her blood eclipse release. Nato was interested in seeing how these kids would manage against this challenge. Shiki tried the same approach he took when fighting against Nato, but it didn't work this time. Nato called that just a 1 in 100 lucky shot, although he did give him credit for it. The blood beast slammed its hand on the hard ground, almost getting Shiki, but then it grabbed a handful of the same tough gravel and threw it at Shiki. Shiki was truly against the ropes. He hadn't lost a single fight before in his life, but this was just pathetic from him. His father had laid down his life for him, but he couldn't even protect what he died for. Tears started falling from his eyes. Shiki didn't know being weak would be this humiliating and frustrating. Here to ruin his tender moment was Jin, who told him he should go somewhere else if he wanted to weep like an infant, making Shiki do a complete 180 in terms of emotions by going from sad to mad in record time. Jin then faced the beast and opened up his arms to draw blood. While the right still had the buzz saws, his left arm was a single chainsaw. Jin's right arm was still not recovered from the hit he took earlier, but that wasn't important right now. Nato was impressed that Jin could make 2 different types of weapons in both hands. Doing this at the same time took a high level of blood control. It was pretty clear Jin wasn't new to this thing, and his precision and experience were definitely a cut above the rest. An Oni's blood can take any shape or strength. The image they hold is transmitted from the brain, and it travels throughout the body, not only through the nervous system but also flowing along in the blood circulatory system, shaping itself accordingly. Since this signal takes off from the brain, sometimes a person's traumas can be reflected, as with Homer's case. Sometimes it reflects preferences or taste, like with Shiki, while others could have their experiences reflected, as with Jin's case. What kind of weapon a demon materializes with their blood is said to offer a glimpse into their life itself. This art of creating unique weapons using Oni blood came to be known as blood eclipse release. Jin dragged his chainsaw along the blood trail, heading for his target. Homer's blood eclipse release tried to smash him with its hand, but Jin jumped out of the way and used this opportunity to get on its arm. He then sliced across the seam of the arm, locking his eyes on his target, its nape. Jin lunged at it and attacked, but the blood beast managed to save itself using its hand. The beast then started swiping at Jin while Shiki was still standing on the side talking to his hand, begging it to do something. Shiki was furious that Jin was able to do it so easily while it was hell for him. Then, Shiki had a rare light bulb moment. He noticed that Jin had only been making weapons used for cutting, while Homar's only release was this. What was it that Shiki was very interested in? That he had plastered all around in his room, and would often have arguments with his father over. Guns! Jin leaped at the beast, and it took notice. He quickly covered his face with his arms to shield himself from more blood vomit, but the monster released a loud scream that burst his eardrums. Nato took out his ring, thinking it was about time for him to jump in and save the day when Shiki came back, this time with his very own blood eclipse release in the form of an assault rifle mounted on his arm. The same Shiki who couldn't control going berserk a little while ago had figured out such an advanced technique, impressing even Nato. The weapon felt like it was a part of his body and gave him goosebumps. For the first time in this battle, Shiki had confidence. The beast swiped at him, but Shiki had already vanished from that spot. He called the beast to look in his direction, revealing himself to be locked in and ready for his target. Shiki pulled the trigger and outshot his Oni blood bullet with an impressive flash and bang. It went straight through the beast, completely obliterating it in the process, leaving both Jin and Nato stunned by its immense power. With this, Shiki had officially announced himself as a capable contender who shouldn't be underestimated. After Shiki's intervention, Homer's blood eclipse release got destroyed, and she became free. Although the loss of blood made her faint, Shiki's attack had not only generated a great amount of power, but it had also changed the weather as rain started to pour. Jin wanted to know how Shiki was able to generate that much power. Shiki saw Homer and started walking to her, but his vision started to get blurry, and each step started feeling like he was walking on jelly. Finally, he collapsed. Nato told him that much was of course expected. Shiki had used up too much blood back then. Shiki struggled and somehow got himself back on his feet to show he was just fine. But reality struck him down right away. Losing blood like that could make you weak and in worst cases even result in death. Nato told him he still had zero control and a very long path to cover before perfecting it. But deep inside, Nato knew the power Shiki just demonstrated was a bit too extreme. Shiki then asked Nato to go and check up on Homer first since she was quite injured. Nato told him of course he wasn't going to help a brat like him first. But this same brat was thinking about helping others when he perhaps needed it the most. Out of the blue, Jin attacked Nato with his song, trying to catch him off guard, but Nato was able to not only respond in time, but also block it effortlessly with his umbrella. Jin jumped back and told him to stop worrying about those that didn't matter because it was just a waste of time. Nato asked him what if they needed urgent medical care. Jin still didn't care. While he tried to treat all his students equally, Nato couldn't pretend that he didn't like students like Jin as he opened up his umbrella for round 2. Jin confirmed once again that if he were to kill him right here and now, he would not only graduate but also get a pick of any unit he desired. Nato told him that was the case and reminded him he still wouldn't be using his blood to fight. Jin then attacked Nato with a renewed spirit, but Nato effortlessly blocked every attempt with his umbrella, while telling Jin dull blades like those wouldn't be able to cut it. Jin didn't back down, so Nato showed him what else his umbrella could do. He set off a smoke screen using his umbrella that smoked the entire area. Then Jin got hit by bullets on his left arm. Nato had assessed that Jin was a close combat type, so he put some distance between them and started firing his rubber bullet rounds out of his umbrella. While they were rubber bullets, Nato was using them quite efficiently by striking Jin's arm that he injured during his fight with the Blood Titan. But there was something even Nato didn't consider. That Jin could also use long-range projectiles. Jin then used his blood eclipse release called Blood Spray Dissection Dance, which sent attacks as sharp as daggers at a distance. The moment Jin thought he had gotten close enough to finish Nato off, Nato threw a grenade in his direction with a ticker. But it turned out to be yet another smoke grenade. Jin started looking around his shoulders, expecting Nato to snipe him from long range again. Then, in a flash, Nato appeared behind him and delivered a nasty blow to his back, sending a shockwave right through his spine and sending him crashing on the ground. Nato told him he failed to realize the enemy wouldn't just stick to one form of offense. Moreover, he still lacked a ton of experience to try something on him. By this point, Jin too had lost a bunch of blood, which was making it hard for him to even stand up. To make it even harder, Nato threw his umbrella over him. It wasn't being controlled with his blood, but right now, even the machine was enough to keep Jin pinned. Yet Jin still struggled, refusing to give up. Nato had seen how desperate Jin was. All of this just so he could meet his dad. All of a sudden, Jin's eyes lit up. Unlike before, his ears were very attentive. He demanded to know how Nato knew about this. Nato told him he had a habit of doing a thorough background check on every single one of his students. And that's how he found out Jin's father was actually a Momotaro. It was true, Jin's father actually was a Momotaro. This came as quite a surprise to Shiki. Jin started talking about his father, the man who murdered his mother and his sibling. He not only took everything from him, but took everyone from him. The scars on Jin's body were all given to him by the same man who was supposed to be his father, and now acted as a reminder of the hatred he had for him. Jin had clung to life, seeing the lowest of lows like eating garbage to fill his stomach, all because of one thing. He wanted to kill his father. The hate started powering his body. He began to rise up, pushing the umbrella off him until finally freeing himself. Jin declared he wasn't afraid of dying. That was enough out of him. Nato grabbed Jin's face and slammed him into the ground as hard as he could. He then imparted some valuable wisdom on him. Don't get your goal twisted. If he died while trying to achieve his goal, then it would all be meaningless. Instead, he should strive to get stronger so he could live for his goal. Unless Jin realized that, his life would get cut short very quickly. As the rain continued to pour down, Nato called to ask for a nurse for Homer, while also letting them know Jin had been contained by him. The only one left now was Shiki, who was as mobile as a newborn deer right now. Nato told him he only had 5 minutes and 42 seconds to reach the school before time was up. Nato also happened to come across something on his way here. It was one of the balls he made mandatory to have on your person in order to win. Nato gave Shiki 2 options. Either run around the jungle for 5 minutes and 38 seconds or take this one from him. Shiki made the decision to pick the first option and darted away. Nato gave him a small head start and then quickly went after him in a flash. Jin regained consciousness but was unable to free himself from Nato's expert-level rope work. Suddenly, the bushes to Jin's right started shuffling. Out came Shiki of all people, and he stood in front of Jin. He then offered to help him if he would work with him in return. Jin swiftly refused his offer, considering it an embarrassment for himself to be saved by him. But Shiki was adamant. He asked Jin what was more important to him right now, his pride or his goals, because Shiki at least had his priorities sorted out. Shiki then revealed that his father was a Momotaro too, so they had more in common than he thought. Shiki asked him to lend a hand one more time, but Jin's answer was like a stuck record player that kept saying no. Meanwhile, Nato was beginning to think that perhaps he did lose sight of Shiki. He searched around and started wondering if Shiki returned back when he spotted Shiki running through the forest. Nato went after him, but this was all a plan. A plan Jin had set up where Shiki would act as the bait. When Jin refused Shiki the last time, he followed up by saying he'd help if Shiki worked with him. In other words, become the bait. Waiting for his chance, Jin pounced at Nato from the treetops. Nato didn't take it that seriously because he shouldn't be able to use his blood very well right now. But that wasn't even Jin's plan. That's when Nato noticed the rope he used to tie Jin up. Jin had tied that rope to a rock and swung it around Nato to bind him up. Once it wrapped around him, both boys grabbed an end and started pulling. They were using all their might, but Nato wasn't even budging. Perhaps if they still had their stamina, the story could have turned out a little differently. Jin hit Nato with a long-range attack using the last bit of stamina and blood he had left, which distracted Nato just long enough for Shiki to run up to him and swipe the ball out of his hands. These two had just under 3 minutes of time left to get to the finish line. Realistically, it was still possible for one of them to make it. Nato predicted that Jin would try to steal the ball and Shiki would chase after him. And in their struggle, he would have no trouble subduing them both. But that's not what actually happened. Shiki told Jin to take the ball and run. Jin did exactly that while Shiki cheered him on. Nato had figured out what type of guy Shiki was. He was an honest, simple type. The kind that would make decisions based off what they perceived as right or wrong, rather than having a long-term planning of what's to come. Nato then burst Shiki's bubble by telling him he would fail if only Jin crossed the finish line like that. Shiki's world shattered, and he fell into depression for not realizing this sooner. While on the other hand, victory seemed to be within a hand's reach for Jin when Shiki's words started repeating in his head. He couldn't just leave him like that. So he took a U-turn and dashed back just as fast. Shiki noticed him and started worrying if he was perhaps directionally challenged. Jin was yelling out to him to not misunderstand. He wasn't doing this to help him. He just didn't want to win feeling indebted to Shiki and would rather get expelled and do a redo in trying to obtain his goals. So, the one who should take the ball and win was Shiki. Suddenly, their bromance got interrupted by the arrival of a tiny little pig called Muku, whose job was to deliver high-speed comms courier from the Baku Express. Muku's job was to deliver messages quickly and without leaving any kind of trace with a top speed of 300 kilometers per hour. The fact that Muku was here right now was not a good sign. Nato pressed on play that started playing an emergency recording from the Kyoto branch of Oni Agency. They were under attack by the Momotaro Agency and were requesting immediate backup. Back at the waiting area, the rest of the students were starting to get tired of waiting. It had been an hour since Group 1 had left. Juji wondered if all three from Group 1 had failed. While Ikari was just pumped their turn was up next and Rokuro wondered what kind of illness he caught from the rain. That's when Jin and Shiki could be spotted running behind Nato, who gracefully skated in the front with Muku. But Homer was nowhere to be seen. Nato told them she had lost a lot of blood and was going to be in the infirmary for a few days. Shiki informed them about the trouble at the Kyoto branch, and Nato announced that since this was an emergency request for backup, all of them were going to be heading there. Heading to Kyoto on their speedboat, Nato didn't waste this opportunity to pile up someone finger push-ups. While on the other hand, Shiki finally managed to make his horns disappear, a task that was supposed to be as simple as breathing for Honest. Shiki got thrilled and shared it with Ikari, who couldn't care less if Shiki had found Atlantis. As these two hotheads got into it, Juji confirmed if they were really going to a place that was currently under attack by their sworn enemy. Nato told him they didn't have a choice. All other classes were busy doing fieldwork right now. Besides, none of the students would actually be on the battlefield. They would only be providing backup doing support tasks. The students weren't too thrilled to learn they'd be acting as errand boys during an emergency. Shiki teased Ikari that at least he got to pass the test this way. Juji tried to tell Ikari that support was also an important mission. But Ikari wanted some battle experience and told him to shut his 4 eyes up. As a response to which Juji took them off thinking that would resolve the issue. Nato just didn't want to add to the body count. As far as these new uniforms were concerned, Nato had them all wear them so that they didn't stand out. Furthermore, he advised his students to try their best to blend in so they didn't get snatched up by the police. Rokuro then came up with a question. What kind of support work did this job entail? Followed by I feel sick, am I going to die right now? Nato answered the second one first, telling Rokuro that he wasn't going to die, it was just seasickness, and then moved to the first question. Each municipality had an Oni agency in it. These had 2 important units in them. One was of course the battle unit who would face the Momotaro agency directly on the front lines, while the other was the support unit, whose job was to aid the honest living among humans, providing support and help to those without any friends or family. And since Honest couldn't go to normal doctors, the support unit would provide necessary medical and mental care to Honest in need. In emergency situations like these, their roles were that of rescue and medical support, and they were all heading to Kyoto to lend a hand to this support unit. Shiki was annoyed that they had to join up with a support unit. If Samudare was there among them, he would be wasting a golden opportunity for getting his revenge. As though he had read his mind, Nato told Shiki the Momotaro he was thinking about was not going to be there. This was because just like the Oni agency, the Momotaro agency had regional branches as well. Juji raised the important question. What kind of Momotaro could they expect to be there then? Nato didn't embellish his words when describing him. All he needed to say was this particular Momotaro was quite the insane one, as we saw him smiling while standing on top of several dead Honest.